Welcome back to another episode of Trojan Dash. As always, I'm your host, Reagan Griffin, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Nathan Ackerman. How are we doing today, bro?
Big things are happening in the Pac-12. We might have football back soon. We're going to talk about that and many other things, of course, but I'm doing pretty well.
I'm doing great. You know who else is doing great?
Robert Woods is doing
Robert
great.
Woods is doing exceptional. Just breaking news right before this show started. Robert Woods got a 4-year, $68 million extension. We won't get into it too deep, but I do want to say, Robert, help a brother out, bro. Help a brother out. It's bad. College student stuff, man. But what are your thoughts on everything that's been going on with the Pac-12, Larry Scott, Governor Newsom? You think it's on the comeback, man, or is it going to happen?
See, I've had a little bit of a mixed reaction this week, and the reason why is that I definitely believe that football can come back soon. I definitely think it can come back in October. That might be a little optimistic. The one part of me that doesn't understand where this all adds up is, could this have happened sooner? And the reason I say that is that it was this week, just a couple days ago. I want to say Tuesday, but I might have the day wrong there, where a bunch of USC players wrote a letter to Gavin Newsom, I think, and they said, look, there are too many restrictions in place. Conferences across the country, the NFL, they're both starting their seasons right now. Why can't we be doing the same? All of a sudden, in a matter of like 2 or 3 or 4 days, now all of a sudden we're looking at an imminent return to Pac-12 football. The state's saying that they can play. The county's saying that they can play. Now it's up to the presidents. And this all started when a bunch of USC players said that they wanted to play. So if there weren't restrictions from the state preventing them from practicing in the first place, and the county just said that it's not going to have anything preventing them from practicing either, it just seems pretty coincidental that this all happened a couple days ago, right after the USC football players wrote that letter. And it makes me wonder if we maybe could have gotten started on this process way earlier, and we could be even closer to a return than we probably are right now.
So there's two options in my mind, right? The option that you just posed to me is that, we could have been doing this. Or the other option is that they got their hand forced, essentially, in that they saw the SEC playing, they saw the ACC playing, the Big Ten and the Big 12 are coming back, and they felt like they were going to be the only Power 5 conference to not come back, and Newsom may not have wanted that on his conscience. Maybe he didn't want that on his head. Maybe he didn't want to deal with that backlash. That's the alternative option that I think could be the case. And I think it definitely speaks to the power that the USC players had, to where they came out with that, and immediately here comes a 180 from Governor Newsom. Our producer also mentioned to me, maybe Larry Scott just didn't even know we could be playing football this entire time. Maybe he misinterpreted the rules. There are a lot of things that we really don't know here, but the interesting thing is that we're definitely probably going to have football coming back pretty soon, which gives us a lot more to talk about as it relates to our show. I'm still not convinced that it's safe, man. I'm not convinced that it's safe, and maybe that's just the skeptic in me. Maybe that's the person that wants to be a little bit I'm more aligned to being safe than sorry, but I look at what's happening in the South, and I see, it could be happening, but I'm not sure if it should be happening because the precautions just don't seem to be there. My home city, Memphis, that team went up, and there was a lot of COVID cases on that team. It got widespread because of an incident with a party bus. I'm not convinced that it's time yet. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm definitely not convinced that it's time yet either. However, I will say I think that if there's one conference where it is time, it's probably the Pac-12. I mean, other conferences around the country, they don't have the kind of daily frequent 15-minute turnaround testing, kind of programs that the Pac-12 does have. And I will say, I want to talk about the point you made that the Pac-12 might have had its hand forced. I think that if that is the case, and if the Pac-12 looked across the country and said every other Power 5 is playing, from a purely football standpoint, and I understand that isn't the way that we can look at things right now because the health and safety must come first, but from a purely football standpoint, I will say that is and I don't say this a lot. I really don't say this a lot. So appreciate the gravity of this moment right here, but that was probably a pretty good move by Commissioner Scott. And the reason I say that is that the Pac-12, as far as the reputation goes, as far as how people view the Pac-12 conference, is not positive. People do not think highly of the Pac-12, and that's partially because this conference with supposed football powerhouses like, Oregon, USC, Utah, never made a college football play, or at least they've never won a college football playoff. I don't think they've ever made it, or maybe Washington made it 1 year. But the point is, people do not respect the Pac-12, and it would have looked that much worse if the Pac-12 had probably the most advanced testing program in the whole country, and it was the one school that was kept out of college football playoff national championship competition for whatever reason. So I will say, Larry Scott, that's probably a good move on his part. However, of course, we must understand that the health and safety have to come first, and none of these decisions can be made in a sort of vacuum. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So these things, but they all have to be considered, because on the one hand, we aren't sure if it's even smart for them to come back. On the other hand, we definitely want them to come back, and as far as the Pac-12's reputation goes, probably needs to come back.
Yeah, and I definitely think that something that's not lost on any of us is the fact that the players want to play. And a lot of players, I mean, you had Amon-Ra, and, this is purely speculation on my part, but Amon-Ra is a guy who could be going to the NFL, likely will go to the NFL, likely in the first 3 rounds. And that's one of the people that we thought could opt out. And in my mind, the fact that he wrote his name on that letter, people have been going around with the jokes like Governor Amon-Ra St. Brown. The fact that he was willing to put his name on the letter tells me that he wants to play football so bad that he knows this team could be so good that this year is not a year to waste, and he would hate to see this year go down the drain. So that's not lost on me, that the players want to play and they know how talented this team can be. I'm just not convinced yet, man. I'm not convinced about the safety, and that's not an indictment on the players at all. That's an indictment on the way that this country's handled the virus as a holistic unit, man. I want to see more people in the chat, though. I want to see what people have to say, whether or not it should be safe for people to come back and play football. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there a possibility that we see Jay Tufele come back? Is it a possibility that we see Elijah Vera Tucker come back? Omit themselves from this season just because, they thought they would be playing in the spring. Turns out they could be playing as soon as October or November is the word on the street. Those are the dates projected for them to come back and start playing football, man. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. A user in the chat asked a rather rhetorical question. They said, "People watch the Pac-12?" ? And that's a valid point. Not that
depends on where you're from.
Pac-12. Sure.
If you're from where I'm from the South, and they call it like Pac-12 after dark, because if you're on the East Coast, you're not watching any of those Pac-12 games. I remember Christian McCaffrey got robbed of a Heisman because of the time that he was playing his games. He completely deserved that Heisman over Derrick Henry, and I hold to that to the day that I die. But do people? I mean, as far as Pac-12 region goes, people are watching these games, man. So I appreciate the question. Something tells me you might be from the South, bro.
And well, this is exactly the point that I'm talking about. People already don't watch the Pac-12. People already don't care about the Pac-12. People already don't respect the Pac-12. Now, if the Pac-12 was somehow to be one of the only Power 5 conference that was not playing this fall, and everybody else was playing, everybody else was having their fun, everybody else was competing for a college football playoff, for a national championship, for a postseason, all these kinds of things that people want to tune into, and the Pac-12 was just sitting on the sidelines watching that go by, it would definitely hurt the Pac-12's reputation. It would further, prove to people that people don't really need to take the Pac-12 seriously as a conference. Now, again, that's from a purely football standpoint, and that's not the only thing that matters here. Of course, it's probably secondary, to health, to whether these athletes can stay safe, whether it's going to have an impact on communities. But from a purely football standpoint, it would be nice to have the Pac-12 back.
I will say, from my personal experience, it seems like the USC, at least for the athletics department, seems to be cracking down on exactly what's happening here, even more so than they already were. I usually like to work out on the field over by the athletic department. They said, no, you can't come here anymore, man. So it seems like they're at least going to give the players somewhat of a bubble within USC to try to make sure that they're given as much space that they need to make sure that there's no infiltration of COVID-19. It's going to be very interesting, man. But I want to switch gears a little bit. The USC has gotten a lot of new coaching hires. Not the coaching hire that people wanted, or should I say the coaching fire that a lot of people wanted. I still hold to my guy Clay Helton forever and always. But Clay Helton got himself a couple of new supporting cast members. Todd Orlando, Dante Williams. So I want to flip the question to you, Nathan. Who of the new coaching staff hires do you think is going to have the greatest impact on USC's program?
So I wrote about this as part of my pre-show column for Sports Pac-12. And the obvious answer here, Dante Williams, right? USC's recruiting the last couple of years has not been what USC's recruiting normally is, right? They're LA, they're losing homegrown LA products to Oregon. They're just not getting the same 4- and 5-star guys that they normally get. But the problem for this USC team in the last couple of years, you can argue that it was Clay Helton, right? The problem for this team was not the talent, right? The talent was the last thing that was hurting this SC team. I mean, look at the playmakers that they had. They had, on the defensive side of the ball alone, Drake Jackson, Jay Tufele, Talanoa Hufanga, Isaiah Polamau, Elijah Griffin, Chris Steele, Isaac Taylor Stewart. I mean, the names, the list just keeps on going on, and yet somehow this defense was just not good. It was just not good. And defense is why USC has been obviously not a bottom feeder in the Pac-12 the last couple of years. They've still been one of the above average teams, but they haven't been anywhere near where USC standards have been, and they've had the talent on the roster to get that done. Clancy Pendergast, the old defensive coordinator, was just not the answer. He was not getting the production out of this super talented roster that you would expect. And so I think that Williams is going to get USC's recruiting back to where it needs to be, which is top 5 in the country, number 1 in the Pac-12, year in and year out, no question about it. Todd Orlando is going to be the guy that's going to have the biggest impact on this team, even if he's just a marginal improvement over Pendergast. Anything is better than that at this point. And I think USC's roster is so talented that they just need somebody to be able to squeeze all the production that they possibly can out of those players. And I think Orlando might be the guy to be able to get that done.
We give out awards I work in Annenberg Media over at USC. It was kind of a fun end of the semester. We give out awards, and the award that I won this year, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I got the Adoree Jackson Award for versatility. That's something that I value greatly, is something that somebody that's able to have their hands in a lot of different things and be successful at all of them. So that's why my answer, and I thought very hard about Dante Williams, because the recruiting thing is a major issue that needed to be solved, but it's not the only issue. 3 things that USC needs to do, in my mind, are shore up recruiting, fix the defense, and change the culture. 3 most important things on USC's list of to-do things. So who's going to cover all of that? Todd Orlando, he shores up the defense. He does a lot to fix the culture. I'm not sure how much he provides from a recruiting standpoint. He does get you to a little bit more access to Texas than you wouldn't have had before, but the majority of the recruiting happens on the West Coast. Dante Williams, he shores up the culture. He gets you definitely a lead in recruiting, but in terms of how much impact he has on the defense as a whole, he's a cornerback coach, so that's this is very specific defense, or part of the defense. I want to give a shout out to Craig Navarre, man, and this is a very low key. I don't think a whole lot of people would say him, but the thing is, Craig Navarre, as good as a recruiter as Dante Williams is, Craig Navarre is right up there. If you look at the rankings for the best recruiters in the Pac-12, Craig Navarre is top 5. He's also a dude who changes the culture. That same mentality of working hard, getting all the ugly stuff out of the way early so you can be pretty later on in the season, that Todd Orlando has, Craig Navarre has that as well. He came with Todd Orlando, right? And then when I talk about what is your impact on how the defense functions, the most important player on USC's defense is the safety. And usually you think about that for the middle linebacker, right? That's the guy who's kind of calling the shots and running the show. In this defense, it's going to be the safety, because your job is not only is to quarterback the defense, but you have to be such a great athlete, and you have to have such great instincts, and you have to be almost everywhere on the field at once at the same time. Isaiah Polamau and Talanoa Hufanga, those are going to be the most important guys if they do play once this USC defense come back. And Craig Navarre is the safeties coach, right? So he's the most important, or he coaches the most important position on USC's defense. He's helping out in recruiting, and he changes the culture. That level of versatility, man, hand that guy the Adoree Jackson Award when it comes to coaching. I think that's something that brings a lot of value, and he's not going to, be the big name, and he's not going to get all the accolades that you would hope, right? But I think that's the guy that definitely has a coaching future at somewhere else, whether it's a defensive coordinator and a head coaching position down the line. And I think he's going to have a very strong impact in his time here at USC, which is why I'm giving him the most impactful hire.
I'm going to buy that for the most part. I want to push back on the point that he's going to be the most impactful coach. I don't know if I'll go quite that far. And the reason I say that is that USC's safeties, honestly, I think you can put them with pretty much any coach, and they're going to do a fine job, at least passable, probably. I mean, these guys are just so talented. So I don't know if the impact that he's going to have on that position group is going to be big enough to where you can say he impacted the defense as a whole. I think those guys are They're veteran leaders. They're smart. They know what they're doing. They're talented. They're physical. Pretty much every aspect of the game, those guys can get done.
Right.
I'm not going to make the case. I'm not going to make the case that if you're a good enough student athlete, if you're a good enough player, especially at the college level, that you don't need coaching. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But I think that USC's safeties have not at all been the problem the last couple of years. And I don't know
not the two current guys that are there. And Hufanga and Palomao, those guys are insanely talented, and they were talented under Pendergast, and they're going to be talented under Navarre. I'm thinking forward into the future, man. The future crop of safeties that come through here, they're going to need to know how exactly to play that safety position down to a T, because they're the most important player on the field. So when I'm thinking about the future, I forget who the safety was that they recruited this year. Out of Texas, Julian Simon, I think it was.
Yeah.
That dude's an insanely talented, gifted player, but he's going to have to learn how to play the safety position for USC, which is going to take a lot. Those are the dudes I'm thinking about when it comes to Craig Navarre. It's going to be immensely important for him to show them what exactly their function within the defense is and how to execute at a high level. And for that safety position, which is, like I said, the most important position on USC's defense, that's vital to the success of this team.
I will buy that, but I think that even if you have talented safeties, even if you have talented safeties, and anybody watching the show, we want you to weigh in the chat. Who do you think might be the most impactful USC coach, especially on the defensive side of the ball? But I do think that even if you have talented safeties, even if you had good safeties coaches, you need somebody to make that all come together. Right, you need a defensive coordinator that's going to be able to take. Stop at that. You need to take a defensive coordinator who knows how to take a good defensive line, which, despite Jay Tufele leaving, USC probably still has good linebackers, which I'm not quite as sold there. But you're actually going to talk about that in our last segment of the show. Good safeties, good cornerbacks. I think USC has at least 3, if not 4, of those position groups, and they can all be good on their own. But you need somebody to draw everything up so that they all play off each other's strengths. They all work together. They know exactly what they're doing, and you need somebody tougher. Honestly, you need a defensive coordinator tougher on his team, tougher on his players, encourages more physicality, whatever, lights a fire under them, more than Clancy Pendergast has done for the last couple of years. And if there's one thing that Todd Orlando brings to this team, it's intensity. And I think that is going to be super huge for this defense.
That is, I'm with you 100%, man. I just value that versatility. I think that's something that's going to be vitally important. But I do want to keep it pushing, man. Let's talk about what you just brought up. You kind of gave a little spoiler for my take. It's all good. Which is which Trojan player, right? We're looking at a season. I think we both agree that a season is probably imminent. Which Trojan player might break out this season?
Well, I'm gonna give you the floor first. I almost spoiled your take. I feel like you gotta just get it out there.
It's all good. So, I am somebody who very much values the linebacker position. I played linebacker in high school, my senior year of high school at least, and I think there's a player on this USC roster who is insanely gifted, insanely talented, an NFL prospect if he gets everything together. He's been injured a lot, but you get him on the field going 110%, that dude is going to be a baller. And forgive me if I butcher his name, but it is Palaie Neote. I believe that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah,
but he's the linebacker out of Bishop Gorman, right? We all know what Bishop Gorman brings to the table. They're one of the top high school teams in the country year in and year out. And I'm not here to talk about high school, but the dude was a 5-star recruit for a reason. He comes here. He has to deal with a lot of injury concerns, and unfortunately that kept him on the wayside for a little bit, and that's valuable time that you would have liked to have had for him to develop. The defensive coordinator last year did not trust him to play the middle linebacker position, so they actually switched him to outside linebacker, not his natural position. And he had his moments. He showed flashes, but it wasn't anything spectacular yet. I think now that he's at that inside linebacker position, playing his natural position, getting to be the pounder that he's used to, listen, I hate concussions, man. I hate them. Every time I think about it, I think back to my own football career and how many times I might have suffered something. But I think it says something when this dude comes in for a second and he immediately gets a concussion. That tells you he's aggressive, man. He's aggressive. And obviously you want to get your head out of the way. I'm not advocating for any sort of putting your head down and attacking. But what I do need in a linebacker is for you to be aggressive. And that dude has that in spades, man. I think that's a dude that's ready to shine. I think it's his time to shine. And I think it's definitely imminent that he's going to shine. So, Neote, I know you're coming this year, man. I know you're coming.
Okay. Again, sticking to the theme of me buying things on this show, I will buy that. But I wanna ask you, are you talking about the most potential or the most likely to break out? Because he definitely has some of the most potential on this team. But do you trust him enough to stay healthy over the course of a full, however many games that might be? Of course, if it's a 6-game season, if they're playing only 6 games this year, it's obviously twice as likely that he stays healthy the whole season. But do you trust him over the course of a 6, 8, 10, 12, however many game season, 14 college football playoff? Do you trust him enough to be able to make that mark and be able to truly take that leap forward, given, especially considering his injury past and all the time he's missed, like you said, sort of developing and becoming that more experienced player that, time that he obviously missed being on the sidelines the last couple seasons? So
my philosophy when it comes to injuries in sports has always been, unless you are getting injured by product of the way that you play, i.e. Derrick Rose, I'm not going to hold you to your injuries. If these are freak accidents, and you and I are both Eagles fans, right? So we know what happened to Carson Wentz. A lot of freak accidents happen. That's why I'm, hesitant to put the injury-prone label on him. Same philosophy here. His injuries are not a product of the way he plays, just some freak accidents that are extremely unfortunate. So do I trust him to stay healthy? It was really unlucky the fact that he wasn't for these past couple of years. And I can't hold him to that because his injuries aren't a product of the way that he plays. Granted, the concussion might have been, but outside of that, when we talk, I think he tore his ACL. That's something that's just a freak accident, man. That's something that can't be prevented. So I do think that that's a guy who can stay healthy over the remainder of the season. All right, I'm gonna stick with the defensive side of the ball, because there's a guy who I think is a potential early round NFL talent. And we've seen it time and time again. We've seen flashes over the last couple of years. The problem with him has been the discipline, right? Too many stupid penalties, too many unnecessary roughness, pass interference, whatever it might be. Penalties have just been what's killing this guy, right? But we've seen the footwork, we've seen the athleticism, we've seen the physical ability to break out and to be one of the best cornerbacks, not only in the Pac-12, but in the entire country. And that's what I'm banking on for Elijah Griffin this year. What do you think? My cousin? No.
Sure, your cousin.
No. Same last name, but okay, go ahead. I'm with it.
I just think this guy, again, discipline for me has been one of the biggest issues, and he's had a couple of years to develop. He has, again, pretty much entirely new defensive coaching staff that I thought at times was a little too easy last year. Sort of didn't really ingrain this sort of disciplined attitude into his players that I think USC could have really benefited from. Now that they have that, now that he's had a couple of years to sort of learn how to adapt to the college level, sort of learn how this team functions, sort of learn how this defense plays, I think he's a guy that could really make waves this year. I admit that I have wondered at times whether he's big enough. He's not, the most ripped dude. He's only, I think, like 6'0", 6'1", so he's not definitely one of the biggest cornerbacks in the Pac-12 or the country, let alone. But I still think that with the talent, with the athleticism, if he can just sort of get it clicking up there, this guy could be dominant. Hey, man.
I don't hate that at all. The two most valuable things that you need to have as a corner, right? Obviously, you want a guy who's really good in press, but you need your feet and you need your hips. And that guy has great feet and great hips, and his anticipation and ability to keep with the receiver over the course of a route, it's impeccable. Like you said, you see it in flashes, but then there's times where he gambles a little bit too much. There's times where he goes for risks that aren't exactly necessary, and those are when the big plays happen, right? And that's when you're like, you got to get, I hated playing corner because it puts you on an island, right? It's you and the receiver, mano a mano, and if you screw up, everyone in the Coliseum sees that it's your fault, right? If I'm a defensive lineman and I go up the wrong gap, my linebackers are cleaning it up. If I'm a linebacker and I miss an assignment, my safeties are cleaning it up. The two players on the defense that can't screw up are your corners and your safeties. And when you see them screw up, everyone knows it happens, man. So I think that's kind of why this narrative has been thrown around about Elijah, that might not be as good. But like you said, the talent is right there, man. It's almost it's similar to Jalen Mills, and they're not similar athletically, but they're similar in that they love taking risks And sometimes they don't always pay out, and sometimes they do. But when it doesn't, it goes pretty badly. But I am a big believer in Elijah's talent. I think that, like I said, great feet, great hips, and the potential's there. I mean, the potential's always there with all of USC's corners. They never get a bad corner. It's whether or not they're going to stay disciplined enough to keep up on the routes. And I definitely think that's a guy that has the potential to keep doing that. However, I'm not sure if I'm willing to go as far as to say he's an early round talent. I think he's an NFL talent for sure.
Okay.
Between our two guys, the only early round talent that I could see is my guy, Paliie Neote. I think I got that one right. But yeah, early round talent, like I said, 5-star for a reason. The dude is a pounder. He is 250 pounds. He's on the slower side. So when we talk about the evolution of the NFL linebacker and how the guys are a bit smaller and quicker now, that is not exactly to his favor, but there's still space in the NFL for a guy like that who's a grinder and a pounder. And I think he has weight to lose if he needs to. But I like both of these guys. And, in an ideal world, they're both breaking out this year, right? That's what we're all rooting for as USC fans, is for everybody to play to their potential. But I would say that my guy's ceiling might be a little bit higher than your guy. I don't know, anything to add?
I will say he's Warren G's son. I mean, the guy's got the X factor.
Regulators.
Right? I'm a big X factor guy. This guy plays with so much energy, plays with so much passion. He dances pretty much better than anybody on the entire roster. So again, you can take the X factor stuff with the grain of salt. But this guy loves football. He has fun doing what he does. He's willing to put in that work. And I think that because of that, he has a chance to make a major impact for this team. Now, I do want to get on one more guy that I think could really jump onto the scene this year. And I know it might be kind of a cop-out because we're talking about which guy might break out the most. Mm-hmm. But Marquise Stepp, for me, is a guy. If he is fully healthy, that dude can dominate. I mean, that guy is just massive. I've seen him walking around school from time to time, and I'm just like, that guy could end me, right? That dude is just massive. He's huge. You cannot bring him down. You saw him high-fiving Reggie Bush after he, carried like 4 different Utah defenders on his back last year. You cannot tackle the guy. And for me, he tore his, I think it was his ACL. It might have been his Achilles. I think it was his ACL, though. And if he fully recovers from that, and I think that the recovery from that has been a little bit slower than people originally anticipated, but I think that this extra time off, of course, is only going to help him get more fully healthy from that. But I think that if he is fully back this year and he's fully ready to go, that guy can be a stud. I mean, I think he already is a stud, and I know he's not the fastest running back out there, but I think that he has the size, he's got the footwork, he's got the agility to make waves this year. What do you think?
The only thing that worries me about that, and I agree with you from a talent standpoint, the dude definitely has all the physical tools to be a really good running back. However, and it was Achilles, by the way, that he tore out the ACL. When we talk about how USC's offense functions, we all know it's the air raid, and I don't even want to get into the fact that it's air raid because you always need a running game. But they're a running back by committee team. And when we talk about breakout, I'm thinking you're putting up stats that are a lot better than you were the previous year. I'm not sure if I see Marquise Stepp putting up stats any better than he did in the previous years, simply by product of the fact that you're going to be seeing Keenan Christian. You're going to be seeing all the other running backs that are currently on USC's roster contributing to the overall product. So I'm not exactly sure if he's a breakout candidate, but from a talent standpoint, it'd be a shame if that dude didn't even go to the combine, right? Because that dude is, like you said, all the physical tools needed to be the NFL running back. I'm just not so sure if his stats are going to speak to that per se.
Mm-hmm. I know we do this a lot, and I'll make this quick because I know we got to wrap up in about a minute or so. But I'm going to bring it back to the Eagles, right? Our team, both of our teams.
Love it.
They are a running back by committee. They were a running back because they didn't have that one guy that could be the starter, that could be the regular, that could play pretty much every snap. If they had that guy, they would have been that team, right? They would have been that team that uses that one stud as much as they possibly can, not cycling different guys in and out of that. And I think that if Marquise Stepp is able to take that step forward and establish himself as that guy, maybe USC sort of shifts away from the whole, 3 different guys cycling in and out kind of thing, and they just say we're gonna ride with Stepp.
Gotcha, man. I like that, man. I see what you did there with Marquis Step taking a step forward. I like that humor, man. If you guys want to see more of Nathan Ackerman's humor, go check out his columns, right? Like that transition, man. Our columns are now exclusive. Dash Sports' columns are now exclusive on sportspac12.com. We are super excited, all of us here at Dash Sports, about our new partnership with the leading independent outlet covering Pac-12 sports. Also, as always, go check out at DashSports.TV on Instagram and Twitter, and DashSports.tv on the website for all of that wonderful, wonderful Nathan Ackerman content, man. You love to see it. Nathan, good as always, man. Love chopping it up with you.
Look, keep your expectations low as far as the humor goes, but definitely be back with more content over the course of the next week, and we'll be back talking at you guys next week.
Yes, sir. All right. For me and for the funniest man on the planet, Nathan Ackerman, we're out of here. See you next week.